call to Torah and the Torah opening blessing. Ya'amod Devorah bat Avraham v'Sarah b'nei Yisrael parsha Chukat-Balak. And the Torah reading blessing. Baruch hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher b'karbanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah. Amen. You may be seated. Well, I'm excited to get to share with you guys today. It's been a little while since I've done a Torah portion, and I'm excited to get to share this one because it has so much action in it. This one is called Chukat-Balak. And so we have, boy, I don't know, anybody, have y'all ever heard anybody saying to study the Bible is boring? I've heard people say, I don't really want to study the Torah, it's so boring. Well, they must be reading the genealogies or something because, listen, this Torah portion has got like weird rituals for cleansing, and it's got then Moses made that big mistake. Oh no. And then there's some people that, that pass away. Miriam dies and Aaron dies. And then we've got all those curses of Balaam, and that he tries to curse and then he can't curse them. And then the donkey starts talking. I mean, it's just crazy. All the things that happens in this section. So, and then we've got some sexual misconduct going on. That's going to happen as well. So, and it ends up with a plague, and it's just a big thing. So, I mean, you don't need to watch, do they do soap operas anymore? Does anybody know? You don't need to watch soap operas, just read the Bible. There's all kinds of exciting things happening. So the first thing that happens is, so I'm going to kind of go through the order of how this section goes. God's kind of given some various commandments and laws for different things. And then I'm going to come back and just concentrate on one specific area that I kind of wanted to talk about today. So the first thing that God talks about is the laws for purification. So he's talking about the red heifer. And a lot of us like to read prophecies about the red heifer. They had red heifers, back in biblical times. And then once the temple was destroyed, well, we couldn't do the red heifer sacrifice anymore. But they're still preparing for it. So there's a rancher guy in Texas that is raising these red heifers. And then when he finds one, it looks like promising, it looks good, then he sends it on over to Israel, and then they have a bunch of priests over there that watch it for about 2 years. Like every day they watch it to see it can't have, there's all these requirements. It can't have any more than 3 non-red hairs. So I don't know who counts the heifer's hair, but anyway, it has to, it has certain qualifications. So it cannot have given birth. It has to be red. It has to be pure. It has to be like the best. You can't just, give God your old cast-offs and stuff. It can't ever have had a yoke on it. So it's a, pretty young red heifer. And then they're going to sacrifice that heifer, and they're going to mix it with some water, and that's what they're going to use for purification after somebody's been in contact with a dead body or something like that. Okay, so there's that whole section. Then, we've got Aaron, and now this is our Moses era at Kadesh. The children of Israel traveled on to Kadesh, and Miriam passed away. So they had mourning for Miriam, and then it's there they realize, hey, man, we're getting thirsty. We don't have any water. So once again, after everything that happened in the last Torah portion, here they come complaining again. We don't have no water, and if only we had died with our when our dead brethren died before the Lord. If only you had left us in Egypt. They're being very dramatic. I understand it's hard to be thirsty. So they're complaining again. So Moses and Aaron goes and falls on their face before the Lord, and the Lord tells Moses, you take this rod and your brother Aaron and gather the congregation, and you're going to speak to the rock before their eyes, and then it's going to bring water for them, and you're going to give water to the congregation. Well, Moses has kind of had it by this time. He's like up to here with those people. And so he gets to the rock, and instead of speaking to it like God told him to, he, is kind of mad at him. Now, hear now, you rebels. And there's some people sometimes I would like to say that to. Hear now, you rebels. Must we bring water? Must we? I thought God was doing this. Must we bring water for you out of this rock? And then he struck the rock twice. That wasn't what God told him to do. God went ahead and honored it. The water came out. But then he says, because you did not believe in me to hallow me before the eyes of the children of Israel, you're not going to get to go into the land. Wow, that was a tough one. So, they got that going on. All right, then the king of Edom refuses to let them come through his territory. That's a real pain. They got to go all the way around. So that's not a good thing. Then the death of Aaron. And I got to see, when I was in Israel, the mountain where he's supposedly buried. So they have like a dome on the very tip top of the mountain. I'm telling you, this is a big old tall mountain. This ain't no little Texas hill country. This is a big mountain. And they have a dome up there as a memorial for where he died. So I can't imagine, at that kind of age, God saying, get up on top of that mountain there, and oh, by the way, when you get there, you're going to die. So anyway, that's what happened. So then Eleazar becomes the priest, the high priest, who was the son of Aaron. All right, then they defeat the Canaanites, but then they've got this whole bronze serpent issue, right? So they go around to Edom, and the people are all mad with Moses again. They're speaking against God again. Why did you bring us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? There's no food, there's no water, And so the Lord is done. He is tired of this mess. So he sends fiery serpents among the people, and they bite the people, and the people are dying. And so they come to Moses. Oh no, we've sinned. Oh, we sinned. Please do something. Please help us. And so Moses goes and prays for him. And so the Lord comes back and says, make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole. When they look at it, then they're going to be healed. Okay, so that one was a confusing one, but for me personally, because God says, we're not to make any graven images. And then he has this serpent. So, that's a confusing one. All right, so they do all that. Well then, and now they're praising the Lord. Spring up, oh well. Remember that when you were a kid in Pentecostal church? Spring up, oh well, within my soul. Y'all remember that one? Yeah, I remember it. All right, then they go on to the king of the Amorites, Sihon. And the same thing. They're like, let us just come through your land. We won't touch anything. We'll pay for anything we do. Oh, no, he's not having it. Nope, he will not allow it. And so, well, then they defeat him. And so, and God says to Moses, don't fear him. I've delivered him into your hand with all his people and all his land. You shall do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt at Heshbon. And they defeated him and his sons and all the people. And there was no survivor left of him, and they took possession of his land. Then they're going on to Moab. Okay, so if you picture Israel kind of a long state, and sort of just below the middle is the Dead Sea, over on this side is Moab. So that would be this side for y'all, is where Moab is. So it's where Jordan currently is. And it's sort of across the Jordan, and also across from Jericho. So Jericho's up here, Dead Sea's over here, Moab's down here. And so Balak is the king there, and so he has Balaam, hey, Balaam, come and curse these people, so maybe I can win. And so Balaam, kind of negotiates with God. God's like, don't go, and then he sends somebody else, and so he goes back and asks God again. And I always thought that was interesting, that Balaam is kind of he's like a seer. He's working sorcery, and he's not an Israelite, but yet he's got this. He's talking with God. He's got enough of a relationship with God that he says, I can't go against what God said. I have to do what God said. So he ends up blessing them 3 times. So Balak's kind of mad about that. And so, well, then he goes on and says, he gives some other prophecies. God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should repent. Has he said, and will he not do? Or has he spoken, and will he not make it good? Behold, I have received a command to bless. He has blessed, and I cannot reverse it. Okay. And so then Balak's really mad with Balaam. And so then what happens is Israel remained in this place called Acacia Grove, and the people in Israel, after all God has done for them, begins to commit harlotry with the women of Moab. So that's kind of the way Balaam got in there. Is he couldn't really curse them, but he could suggest to them, hey, you could go at it about this way. So the Lord says to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and hang up the offenders before the Lord out in the sun, that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. So Moses said to the judges of Israel, every one of you kill his men who were joined to Baal of Peor, because they were having harlotry with these women, and then they were encouraged them to worship this idol Baal of Peor. And so they did that. And well, then this one dude, man, he is really brazen. He comes marching right through there with his new little Midianite girlfriend, and he goes right into the tent and begins to have relations with her. And so Phinehas, who is the son of Eleazar, who's now the high priest, he is indignant about it. And so I think, Lord, if I witness some horrible violation of your law like that, please let me have the presence of mind and the courage of Phinehas to stand up for what is right. And so, boy, he went right in there with a javelin and ran it through the both of them. And so then that stopped the plague, but not before 24,000 people died. All right, so that's kind of the Torah portion in a nutshell. And when I was thinking about this whole thing of Israel's harlotry, here we are at the end of what is called Pride Month. And so it really made me think, what an appropriate time for this Torah portion to come up, because it's about sexual immorality. It's not just about LGBTQ or whatever. It's about sexual immorality. And so we see that God's anger was burned against them in any sort of sexual immorality. I mean, what do you think that these Israeli men's wives thought as they come marching through here with these Moabite women? It doesn't mention the wives, but they surely must have been married, at least most of them. What do you think the wives thought about all that? And God specifically said that they were not to intermarry with other, they were supposed to stay within their own clan. They weren't supposed to marry other women. So God was pretty mad about it. So yesterday I wanted to kind of give you guys like a little modern day take. Yesterday we met up with Alicia, usually sits over here, for dinner. And we were in this little coffee shop, and we were talking about worship in our congregation, the plans that we have and the things we want to do, and as we grow, and our vision for the future and all of that. And this person, there were 2 people sitting next to us, and one of them comes over and says, excuse me, I heard y'all talking about worship. And I was thinking, oh, this must be a musician. It was kind of, how musicians, they kind of look outlandish sometimes. You know what I'm saying? And so we thought, well, she must be a musician, and that's why she's asking about the worship. And so we went on talking. She was telling me about how she had studied theology for a couple of years, and She had grown up Lutheran, I believe she said, and she wanted to know, were we open or closed? And so I'm telling her, oh, this is my husband, Pastor John, and I'm Rabbi Renee, and that way we have a minister, for, if you're coming from a Jewish background or a Christian background or whatever. Were we open or closed? And I had to think for a minute before I realized what they were asking. Are you open or closed? Are we open to LGBTQ, or are we closed to LGBTQ? That's what she was asking. And then I realized that she probably wasn't originally a she. So she's asking, are you accepting to our kind of people? So, that's a hard question to answer. So here's what my answer to her was. Yes, we are absolutely open. We want you to come and be with us. We want to love up on you. We want to feed you some dumplings. We want you to be part of our family, and we're going to tell you the truth and trust God to deliver you. Amen. And so yes, we are open. So if they show up, y'all be friendly, be real nice. But I just thought that was kind of interesting that this week that's what came up in the Torah portion. But what I really wanted to talk to y'all about is this red heifer business. So I'm going to grab my water because I got a little allergy going on that's got my throat a little bit irritated. So I got to have that water. So I thought this was really an interesting thing. What it says about this law of purification is it's about purifying you from death. Okay, so if you're sitting minding your own business in your own tent, eating your own snacks, and somebody in the tent just falls over dead, what do? So you're considered unclean. So now you've got to be ritually clean. That has nothing to do with being physically dirty. A lot of people think that clean or unclean means like we think of, you're dirty or clean. You need to go take a shower. It's not like that. It's a ritual thing. So you would be not able to be in God's temple right then until you become clean. Let's say that you came upon somebody out in the desert, you're minding your own business, picking berries and whatnot, and you come up on some guy that looks like he's in distress, and you're like, oh, are you okay? And you touch them, and then you realize that they're dead. Well, now you're unclean. Let's say that I don't know, whatever other situation. You went to your grandma's funeral and you touched your grandma. You're unclean. All right, so here's what he says, God says that we have to do. He says, now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, this is the ordinance of the law which the Lord has commanded, saying, speak to the children of Israel, that they bring you a red heifer without blemish, in which there is no defect, and on which a yoke has never come. You shall give it to Eleazar the priest. This is Numbers 19, verse 1. We're down about verse 3 now, if you want to read along. Give it to Eleazar the priest, that he may take it outside the camp. It shall be slaughtered before him, and Eleazar the priest shall take some of its blood with its finger and sprinkle some of its blood 7 times directly in front of the tabernacle of meeting. Then the heifer shall be burned in his sight. Its hide, its flesh, its blood, and its offal shall be burned. And the priest shall take cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet and cast them into the midst of the fire, burning the heifer. Then the priest shall wash his clothes, he shall bathe in water, and afterward he shall come into the camp, and the priest shall be unclean until evening. Even the ones that's trying to get the sacrifice ready, they're unclean until evening. The one who burns it shall wash his clothes in water and bathe in water, and shall be unclean until evening. Then a man who is clean shall gather up the ashes of the heifer and store them outside the camp in a clean place, and they shall be kept for the congregation of the children of Israel for the water of purification, for it is purifying from sin. And the one who gathers the ash of the heifer shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. And it shall be a statute forever to the children of Israel and to the stranger who dwells among them. And so then if you come in contact, so that's us, we observe it also. So if you come into contact with a dead body, then you're unclean for 7 days, and you got to purify yourself with this red heifer water on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, and then you'll become clean. So I thought, well, what is that? What's that all about? That just seems kind of like arbitrary and weird, doesn't it? Like some rules, when God says, let's see, Mr. Carlson was talking last week about when God says, don't murder, don't have an affair, don't steal stuff. That all makes sense to us because it's kind of an inbuilt moral code, right? Those are laws that make sense. But this one's kind of strange. Why did God say that? Why a red heifer? Why do we have to burn it and put the ashes in the water? Why, that kind of thing. So sometimes it doesn't always, God's commandments won't always make sense. Some of them are like moral compass thing that you're like, well, sure, that's wrong. And then other things are just things that's sort of because he said so. So in, kind of like when my kids were little and I would say, all right, I need you to go get your clothes, go in the bathroom, and you have to give the kids the really good instructions. Turn the water on. Take your clothes off. Get into the water. Get your whole body wet. Wash everything, including your hair. Get out and dry off. Put on your clothes. Okay, so, because they get it all screwed up. Or they don't wash their hair. You're like, why is your hair still dry? Those of you who are parents, they've done that to you, right? All right, so my kids then, but Mom, why? Because I'm the mom and I said so, that's why. Well, sometimes it's that way with God. Sometimes he'll give us a commandment that maybe we're like, but why, God? That doesn't really make any sense. Because he said so. Because he's our Father and he said so is why in some cases. So, the Jews have categorized these commandments, right? So the ones that make moral sense to us, don't lie, don't steal, don't murder, those are called mishpat. It's a law that makes sense, it's kind of universal, it obviously benefits society. But then, like the sacrifice of an animal for its symbolism, well, that's kind of that's a little bit different, right? And especially if you're somebody that really has a heart for animals, and like I've got some friends that are vegan because they don't feel sorry about the animals getting killed and stuff, and so, that'd be really hard for that to make sense to you. Additionally, it had to be a red heifer. Why is it red? That's odd. So, the Jews, the ancient Jews, the sages, had some thoughts on that, as they do on everything. So they felt like, well, it had to be a red heifer because it's an allusion to the idea that's sort of contained in Isaiah 1:18, and it was Rashi who said this, and I find it just fascinating because it's a prophecy of Yeshua and they don't even know it. Isaiah 1:18 says, though your sins be as red as scarlet, they shall become as white as snow. So they see red in terms of sin. All right, so they're calling for Jesus and they don't even know it. So the other kind of let's see, I've got it in here. The other kind of law that they have besides the mishpatim, the ones that kind of make sense. Yeah, you shouldn't kill people. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, another one is called the chukim, and another one is called the iyadot. So the mishpatim are kind of the majority of Torah, kind of makes sense. Things we're supposed to do are not supposed to do. They're rational, in other words, okay? They're so rational that even if the Torah didn't tell us you shouldn't kill people, you probably just kind of know inside yourself you shouldn't kill people, right? The Eodot are a different kind of commandment. So these are commandments that we probably wouldn't have come up with ourselves. We probably wouldn't have invented those of our own accord. But because the Torah told us to do it, we can figure out some logic in it. We can, it can make sense. Like, for example, the whole idea of eating matzah during Passover. It doesn't, on the surface, maybe make logical sense, but then when we think of it in terms of the Exodus from Israel and the leavening representing sin and the unleavening representing a sinless state, then we can, kind of connect. Okay, that kind of makes sense. We can make that work. We wouldn't come up on it on our own, but logically the explanation makes sense and we can accept it. And then the chukim are ones that there is just no way for us to figure out rationally. So the red heifer kind of fits into that category. I mean, who would think of such a commandment? That's to take a red heifer and burn it and sprinkle its ashes. Nobody would just invent that. Another example would be the commandment prohibiting the wearing of linen and wool together. On the surface, that just makes no sense. Why would it matter? Well, now they've done scientific studies and they know that when linen and wool are combined together, they cancel each other out. The frequency created in those fabrics cancel each other out, and that's bad for our bodies. So there is a reason when God tells us something. We just didn't know about it, what it was about back in the day. So these are laws that are statutes or decrees that you can like it, don't like it, doesn't matter. It's take it or leave it. So you certainly have the option to say, well, that doesn't make any sense to me, and so I don't think I'm going to do that one. You can do that. If that's what you want to do, you can do that. But then you have to say, well, how's that going to work out for you? Not so hot, right? Not so hot. So when we look at the red heifer and we say, how can this be the decree of Torah? It's so different from all the other commands. It's just not like the other commands. It's very unusual. It's kind of like an exception or something. The only way to say it is it's kind of weird. It's kind of a weird command, So we got to look a little bit deeper. So in people, we kind of have two levels of intellect. So this one guy here calls it System 1 and System 2. And so he says, he says that System 2 thinkers update their priors and seek to falsify their assumptions by testing them against reality, while static thinkers, the System 1 thinkers, appeal to the view that we are either saved or damned. System 2 thinkers seek to bring us back to percentages. And so, so they think about that a little bit different. So when we do that, then rather than these chotim blocking us from knowledge, or we say, that's confusing, I don't understand it, it kind of almost becomes a guide to us. So this other guy says it a little bit differently. We have intellect and will. Intellect is something you can explain in words. Will is something that is higher than intellect, but you can't explain it. So if somebody says, when do you want to do this thing? It doesn't make sense, it's crazy. Then you can't even explain to them why. Why do you want to go to Israel for 3 months and be away from your husband and do ministry? I think God's there. You have no logical, real explanation. Yeah, but that's going to cost your family a lot of money. And wouldn't that be better for you to put that money in savings? Yeah, it doesn't. I know. I don't get. It doesn't make sense. That's what God told me to do. It's kind of like we're created in God's image, and so everything that exists in us is a mirror of what God is doing himself, or it should be. It should at least be be that. So those commandments that are mishpatim, they make sense to us. Well, those are easy commandments to follow. They're kind of at a lower level, super easy. When I say to my kid, don't touch the electrical socket because it's going to shock you. There's a reason, it's logical, it makes sense. Now some kids just have to feel the shock, but for the most part, people are gonna do that. But then, when it gets a little more complicated, things that God can't explain to us because we're not capable of understanding it. We're a little finite. We look around this and we think this chair is real. That AV booth is real. No, it's not. This stuff isn't real. What's going on in the spirit world is real. What's going on here is not real. Well, that doesn't make any sense. We can't wrap our little brains around that. So there's certain things that God just can't explain to us because we're just not capable. Our intellect compared to God's intellect is far lower than the ability to understand those things. So this is one of those kinds of things that there's no way God could really condense the reason rationally to us of why we need to follow the red heifer commandment. And yet, I don't know about y'all, but aren't you kind of excited about those red heifers that are going to Israel? Oh, is this one of them? Is it fixing to happen? Because we can all feel in the spirit world, something's coming. It's happening. So we think about that. And when we get to more of a level of maturity, this I guess would be what my final point would be, is when we get to a higher level of maturity in the Lord, then we don't have to understand absolutely every why. We don't get to be like 2-year-olds asking why all the time. We just say, yes, sir. That's what you told us to do. Yes, sir. And what happens out of that is God blesses you and takes you to a whole nother level of walk with Him. Do you find that to be true, Brother Mike?
Amen.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, so that's kind of what I was getting out of the Torah portion for me this week. I hope that maybe some of you got something out of it like that too.
Amen.
If you would, please stand for the Torah closing blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'hei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.